Two of the world's most influential psychologists completely disagree on one question that affects every decision you make: is your childhood responsible for who you are today, or is that just an excuse? This isn't a minor academic squabble. It's a foundational debate about human nature, agency, and the very architecture of our consciousness. On one side, a powerful argument for the inescapable impact of early experience. On the other, a fierce insistence on individual will. Let's probe this critical divide, dissecting the claims of Gabor Mate and Jordan Peterson. For Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned physician and addiction expert, the imprint of early life trauma is profound and inescapable for many. He contends that adverse childhood experiences, from outright abuse to emotional neglect, don't just hurt us, they fundamentally rewire the developing brain. This rewiring creates unconscious patterns that drive adult behaviors, including addiction, chronic anxiety, depression, and the formation of dysfunctional relationships. Mate asserts that these are not moral failings but rather deeply ingrained responses to early environments, often beyond conscious control. Mate argues that most people are living out these unconscious wounds, trapped in cycles they don't understand. He emphasizes that trauma isn't just major catastrophic events but can be subtle, cumulative emotional injuries. When a child's authentic needs for connection and emotional safety are not met, their brain adapts, often by shutting down true feelings or developing coping mechanisms that become maladaptive in adulthood. This perspective suggests that our adult choices are often unconsciously scripted by our past, limiting genuine freedom of action until these deep wounds are acknowledged. Mate's arguments find support in studies like the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs, study. This seminal research, involving over 17,000 participants, revealed a strong dose-response relationship between childhood trauma and numerous adult health problems. For instance, individuals with 4 or more ACEs had a risk of intravenous drug use that was 10 times higher than those with 0 ACEs. They also faced significantly elevated risks for depression, heart disease, cancer, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. These statistics underscore how early life stress isn't merely psychological but has tangible, physiological consequences. Contrasting sharply, Dr. Jordan Peterson, a clinical psychologist and cultural commentator, places immense emphasis on individual responsibility and agency. While acknowledging that life can be brutally unfair and childhoods can be devastating, Peterson insists that dwelling on past victimhood is a self-defeating path. His core message is that regardless of circumstances, individuals possess the capacity and moral imperative to choose to confront suffering, impose order on chaos, and author their own lives. He argues that true meaning is found in voluntarily taking on burdensome responsibilities. Peterson's framework suggests that while your past may present immense challenges, it does not determine your future. He believes that focusing on what you can control, your attitude, your actions, your pursuit of truth, is paramount. He often draws on philosophical and religious archetypes, like the hero's journey, to illustrate that confronting the difficult realities of existence and personal failings is how one develops competence and character. To Peterson, blaming parents or past trauma, while potentially accurate, can become an excuse to avoid the difficult work of self-improvement and personal transformation. Peterson's emphasis on personal responsibility aligns with the psychological concept of locus of control. Individuals with a strong internal locus of control believe they are responsible for their own successes and failures, while those with an external locus of control attribute outcomes to external forces like luck or other people. Research suggests that an internal locus of control correlates with higher academic achievement, better stress management, and improved mental well-being. This perspective underpins Peterson's argument: cultivate the belief that your choices matter, and you unlock your capacity for change. Here lies a critical point of divergence. Mate's approach often seeks to understand the origins of suffering, which can include parents or past circumstances, to foster compassion and healing. Peterson, while not denying past suffering, warns against the corrosive potential of blame as it can paralyze action. Mate sees understanding the past as a necessary step to free oneself from its grip, arguing that self-compassion is prerequisite for change. Peterson sees forward action and radical acceptance of suffering as the primary path to overcome the past, viewing excessive focus on blame as disempowering. Mate extends his analysis beyond individual families, positing that societal structures and cultural norms can perpetuate collective trauma. He argues that environments of chronic stress, inequality, and lack of social support mirror the conditions of individual childhood trauma, leading to widespread anxiety, disconnection, and illness. For Mate, addressing these systemic issues is crucial, as personal healing often requires supportive external conditions. He challenges the notion of purely individual responsibility when society itself is generating pathology, especially for marginalized groups. Peterson, while not entirely dismissing societal influence, tends to pivot back to the individual. He asserts that even in the face of widespread chaos and societal dysfunction, the individual has a moral obligation to clean up their own room first. His argument is that systemic change can only truly begin when individuals assume responsibility for their own lives, speak truthfully, and strive for competence. He views the erosion of individual responsibility as a greater threat than external societal pressures, suggesting that strong, moral individuals are the antidote to collective decline, not vice versa. Both perspectives touch on the neurobiology of agency, albeit from different angles. Mate highlights how early trauma can impair the prefrontal cortex, affecting executive functions like decision-making and impulse control. This makes choosing a different path incredibly difficult for a brain wired for survival responses. Peterson, conversely, implicitly emphasizes the brain's capacity for neuroplasticity and habit formation. Through conscious effort and repeated behaviors, new neural pathways can be forged, allowing individuals to override old patterns and cultivate self-mastery, a process that requires sustained voluntary action. Peterson often warns against what he terms the victimhood narrative, arguing that while acknowledging past suffering is important, allowing it to define one's identity can become a trap. He suggests it disempowers individuals by externalizing control and responsibility, preventing them from seeing their own potential for action and change. For Peterson, true agency comes from understanding that even if you were once a victim, you don't have to remain one. This stance can be perceived as harsh by those deeply affected by trauma, yet it's central to his call for individual fortitude. Mate, from his extensive work with addiction and chronic illness, offers a counterpoint. He posits that the call for responsibility can sound like victim blaming if it doesn't first acknowledge the profound impact of trauma on an individual's capacity to choose. For Mate, true healing begins with compassion, understanding that problematic behaviors are often attempts to cope with unbearable pain. He argues that shaming or forcing responsibility onto someone without first addressing their underlying trauma is counterproductive and can deepen their sense of isolation and inadequacy, making change even harder. The practical implications of these two views lead to very different pathways for personal change. Mate advocates for deep therapeutic work, often involving psychedelics or somatic experiences, to access and release stored trauma. The emphasis is on internal exploration and integration of past experiences. Peterson, on the other hand, frequently advises practical, outward-facing actions, establishing routines, setting clear goals, speaking truthfully, and confronting fears directly. His path is more behavioral and philosophical, emphasizing the construction of meaning through deliberate action in the world. Is it possible that both perspectives hold vital truths? Perhaps Mate illuminates the why of our suffering, providing the deep understanding necessary for genuine self-compassion and insight into our automatic reactions. And perhaps Peterson offers the how, the blueprint for moving forward, for cultivating the agency and responsibility needed to overcome even the most challenging past. Many therapists integrate aspects of both, recognizing that insight into trauma can empower individuals to then take the difficult, responsible steps towards building a more fulfilling life. So, do your parents ruin your life, or do you choose it? The nuanced answer is likely both. Your early experiences undoubtedly shape your predispositions and challenges. The brain's architecture, as Mate describes, is profoundly influenced by your environment. However, as Peterson emphasizes, you also possess a remarkable capacity for conscious choice, resilience, and transformation, regardless of those initial conditions. The real question for each individual becomes, how do you integrate these truths? How do you acknowledge your past without letting it dictate your future? This fundamental tension defines much of the human experience.